You wake up inside a dark cave, and the first thing you notice is the walls. They glow faintly orange, lit by a small fire someone kept alive all night. You sit up, rub your eyes, and swing your legs over the edge of a stone ledge. Your feet barely reach the floor. You are not a tall person. You are not even close to a tall person. You are about the height of a modern 7-year-old child, and you are a fully grown adult. This is not a dream. This is not a metaphor. This was real life on the island of Flores, in what is now Indonesia, for hundreds of thousands of years. For most of human history, your ancestors were not the only humans walking the planet. You shared the world with cousins you have probably never heard of. And one group of those cousins was so small, so strange, that when scientists first found their bones, they refused to believe the truth staring back at them. The year was 2003. The place was Liangbua, a limestone cave on the island of Flores. A team of archaeologists, led by Australian researcher Mike Morwood, was digging through layers of sediment that had been piling up for hundreds of thousands of years. They were looking for evidence of early human migration through Southeast Asia. What they found instead would rewrite the story of our species. 9 meters down, they hit an unexpected layer. It was full of stone tools, animal bones, and charcoal from ancient fires. This was clearly a living floor, a place where people had camped, cooked, and slept. But the bones they found there did not belong to anyone they recognized. They belonged to a skeleton so small that the team initially assumed it was a child, a small child, perhaps a victim of some ancient disease. Then they looked at the teeth. The wisdom teeth were fully erupted, worn down from decades of chewing. This was not a child, this was an adult no taller than a yardstick, a full-grown person with a brain the size of a grapefruit. The skeleton was nicknamed LB1, and the world soon gave her a different name, the Hobbit. So what was she? For more than a decade, 3 competing theories tore the scientific community apart. The first theory said this was simply a modern human with a growth disorder, a condition like microcephaly, where the brain never grows to normal size. The second theory said this was a pygmy population, a group of short humans whose bodies shrank over generations, the way elephants on small islands shrink over time. The third theory, the one Mike Morwood himself believed, was far more radical. This was a new species, a distinct branch of the human family tree that evolved in isolation on this island for 1 million years. A species with a body that shrank to survive in a world with limited resources. A species so different from you that it made a mockery of the simple story of human evolution you learned in school. Here is what you need to understand about islands. On the mainland, big predators rule. Lions, tigers, bears. Predators need a certain body size to hunt large prey. But on a small island, there is no room for big carnivores. The food supply is tiny. Calories are scarce. And in that world, being big is a death sentence. So evolution does something remarkable. It shrinks you. Elephants on Mediterranean islands became the size of pigs. Hippos on Madagascar became the size of dogs. And when an early human population somehow crossed the sea to Flores, they followed the same rule. They shrank over hundreds of thousands of generations. A species of hominin, perhaps as tall as the famous Lucy, around 1.10 meters, got smaller still, until they were barely 1 meter tall. But they were not weak. They were not pathetic. They were survivors. This is the part that should make you stop and think. These tiny people made sophisticated stone tools. They used fire, evidence shows, carefully controlled fires for cooking and warmth. They hunted. Not just small animals. They hunted the giant storks and the dwarf elephants that shared their island. And crucially, they were still thriving on this island when your own ancestors were painting caves in France and burying their dead with flowers. Think about that timeline for a moment. Modern humans like you were already fully formed. You had language. You had art, you had complex societies. And on this single Indonesian island, a completely separate lineage of human was still alive, still hunting, still living their lives, unaware that their time was running out. The discovery at Liangbua was published in October 2004 in the journal Nature. The paper, led by Peter Brown and Mike Morwood, named the species Homo floresiensis. The nickname stuck instantly, the Hobbit. The media went wild, and so did the skeptics. One of the most heated attacks came from researchers who argued that the tiny brain meant this had to be a deformed modern human. But then Dean Falk, a paleoanthropologist at Florida State University, studied casts of the inside of LB1's skull. She found something surprising. The brain, though small, was not organized like a deformed brain. It was folded and arranged like a normal hominin brain, a small brain, but a properly wired one. This was not pathology. This was evolution. Then the questions about the body began. Remember the strange wrists? Paleontologist William Jungers studied them and found they were unlike any modern human wrist, healthy or diseased. The shape was simply different, a body plan that had not existed in your lineage for over 2 million years. By the early 2010s, the tide had turned. Most researchers accepted that Homo floresiensis was a real species, a separate branch of the human family tree. But the argument was not over. It just moved to a new question. Who exactly were these people? Where did they come from? How long had they been there? And then, in 2014, another excavation on Flores delivered a shocking answer. At a site called Mata Menje, archaeologists found fragmentary remains even older than the Liangbua skeletons. Fossils dated to roughly 700,000 years ago. The teeth and jawbone found there belonged to individuals even smaller than the Hobbits. Even smaller. The species had been shrinking for at least that long. So now step into their lives for a moment, because this is where the story becomes yours. Imagine waking up on that island. The air is warm and humid. The cave mouth glows with morning light. Around you, your family stirs. Your mother, your cousin, your grandmother. None of them reaches your shoulder. And that is completely normal. That is just what people are here. Outside the cave, the forest is dense and green. A river runs past, full of freshwater fish and eels. The trees are full of fruit and nuts. And yes, there are dangers. Komodo dragons. Ancient and enormous. Lumber through the same forest, hunting anything they can catch. Being small means you must be smart. You must be careful. You must know every trail, every hole, every sign of danger. This was not a simple life. It was a life that demanded total competence. Let's look closely at how they actually lived. And you might be surprised at just how capable they were. Their stone tools were small, but they were sharp. At Liangbua, archaeologists uncovered tens of thousands of stone flakes. Blades no longer than your thumb, knapped with surprising skill. These were not primitive scraps. They were carefully designed cutting tools, made from volcanic rock, sourced from specific spots kilometers away. That means someone planned ahead. Someone walked for hours to fetch good stone. Someone remembered where to find it and carried it home. Planning, memory, foresight. These are not things you need a huge brain for. These are things you need a well-organized brain for. And that changes how you should think about intelligence. Your brain is about 3 times bigger than theirs. 3 times. And yet, if you were dropped naked onto Flores with no tools, no fire, no knowledge of the island, you would probably not survive a month. They had been surviving there for 700,000 years. So what does big even mean? Their brains were small, but they were not simplified versions of yours. The folding pattern was hominin, a human-shaped brain, compact and dense. Think of it this way. A small laptop with no extra features can run one program flawlessly all day forever. A big laptop with 1,000 features crashes when the Wi-Fi dies. Their brains were built for the one thing that mattered. Reading the island every day without missing a single sign. They knew the eels that live in the river. They knew which fruits turn sweet at the end of the dry season. They knew the sound of a Komodo dragon dragging its belly through the leaves. And they knew to climb. That knowledge was not written down. It lived in their bodies, in their eyes, in the way a mother adjusted her grip on a child before a crossing. This is what expertise looks like when it has no books. Now consider what they did not leave behind. No cave paintings, no beads, no carved figurines, no burials with offerings. For you, symbols feel essential. You wrap meaning around everything. A painted hand on a wall, a ring on a finger, a name whispered to a child. They apparently felt no need for any of that. Or perhaps they simply poured their minds into the living world instead of the imagined one. Their art was the rhythm of the seasons. Their story was the memory of where the water runs after heavy rain. That is the hardest part for a modern mind to grasp. To you, the future is a place you can almost touch. You plan for things that might never happen. You build abstractions. But for a hobbit, perhaps the future was just today and the next sunrise. And maybe, just maybe, that was not a deficiency. It was a kind of peace your anxious mind will never fully know. So what happened to them? That mystery remains unsolved. Their island world stayed stable for hundreds of thousands of years, but around 50,000 years ago, something shifted. The fossil record at Liangbua goes quiet. Some researchers point to a massive volcanic eruption that blanketed the island in ash. Others point to modern humans, your ancestors, finally reaching Flores, bringing with them hunting pressure, new diseases, and a way of seeing the world that left no room for old neighbors. The truth is that no one knows. The last hobbit simply disappears from the evidence, without a final grave, without a goodbye. You wake up inside a dark cave, and the first thing you notice is the walls. And now you know. You were not the first to wake up there. You were just the only one left to remember.